There is a reason that Abraham Lincoln's face is immortalized on Mount Rushmore. He is the great emancipator in America's chapter of slavery. Abraham Lincoln, our 16th president, ended both slavery and a division in the country during the Civil War. Now, I've heard many people bring up the point that Abraham Lincoln only chose to believe and preach the ideals of abolitionism and anti slavery for votes. However, my research suggests that instead, Lincoln started out as a person who disliked slavery but felt he could do nothing to change it. He then changed to be having a more quiet stance of abolitionism to becoming a formidable lawyer with expanding views that transformed into a fierce politician who spoke out against the laws of slavery. He finally became the president who faced the Civil War and freed the enslaved people of the United States. I was first introduced to Lincoln's changing views during a history project, where I read the book Lincoln in Private, what the most personal reflections tell us about our greatest president. From the book, I learned that slavery was protected by federal law when Lincoln was a child, and states started to split into free states and slave states. I also learned that many Northerners shared the idea that slavery would gradually become obsolete, and they had good reason to think this. As the rise of industrial machines that could outpower extra that could completely outpower any person or group of people and still make the same profit were on a serious rise. According to the Historical Journal article called That All Mankind Should Be Free, it is heavily implied that Lincoln's father, Thomas Lincoln, imprinted upon him that it was morally wrong to own another human. In his young adult years, Lincoln became an exceptionally capable, self taught lawyer. And while he did discuss much about his ideas on education and morals, he stayed rather quiet on his ideals of slavery. He still read every piece of literature he could get his hands on, if not only to refine his stance. It was during this time that Lincoln decided to join the world of politics, and just in time because the United States was suffering from a major divide forming. However, after a few years, Lincoln had had enough. According to historical collections of the National Park Service, Lincoln made his first public declaration against slavery in March of 1837 at the Illinois General Assembly. He then proceeded to use every power, platform, and position he had to promote anti slavery. In November of 1842, in an odd twist, Lincoln got married to a beautiful socialite by the name of Mary Todd Lincoln. Well, actually, she was just Mary Todd back then. But from the book, Mary Todd Lincoln, Her Life and Letters, we learn of the ironic situation that Mary came from a family of wealthy Southerners who were also slave owners. But despite this, decided to adopt her husband's abolitionist ideals and became close friends with former slave and dressmaker Elizabeth Keckley. Returning to politics, Lincoln's background as a lawyer let him fight with logic and facts, while also cleverly employing philosophical questions to make listeners form their own answers. Something that not a lot of politicians did back then and now. Oftentimes, spectators to these speeches would come out with new ideas and perspectives that they didn't have before. During all this, Lincoln continued to provoke and test his ethics in any way possible by reading, gathering information, all of which was used to refine his stance and make him a better opponent in the field of politics. He went as far as even reading opposing views just to refine his stance that much more. The book Lincoln in Private explains how we know his personal thoughts. And that is because, from the book, we learn that after Lincoln died, his staff discovered a multitude of notes that Lincoln had written to himself about sort of brainstorming ideas and political things and topics and arguments. These notes were found everywhere, from his pockets to his drawers to his infamous top hat. Many of these notes have been preserved and provide useful insight into the thought process and perspectives of Lincoln. One such note discusses arguments countering slavery based on skin color, intellect, and interest. This next passage is from one of those messages, specifically about skin color. You say A is white and B is black. Is it color then, the lighter having the right to enslave the darker? Take care. By this rule, you are a slave to the first man you meet with fairer skin than your own. This quote was used sometime in a speech later, although my research could not find where. In 1854, in Peoria, Illinois, Lincoln unleashed a speech combating the ideals and arguments of his most fierce opponent, the fiery I am right Stephen Douglas. This speech was so successful that he won over many people and had so much support he was able to launch a full-scale anti-slavery campaign on every platform that he could. After campaigning, debating, lecturing, speech giving, and a lot of hard work, Lincoln was elected president. According to articles from the Library of Congress, Lincoln may have been a staunch abolitionist, but he had to compromise a lot to keep peace in the nation. He used the Confiscation Act as a way to free more slaves who were being held under the Confederacy by their contrabands of war. Unfortunately, he also had to pass laws allowing slave owners to retrieve their runaway slaves, specifically the Fugitive Slave Act, in order to keep the peace in the nation until the war broke out. This may have been confusing to some people, but it was just Lincoln's way of making peace. His views on slavery evolved and refined during Emancipation the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863, the Civil War, and the ratification of the 13th Amendment in 1865, and finally, the slaves being free. Unfortunately, his victory was short-lived as tragedy struck on April 14th of 1865, when Confederate sympathizer John Wilkes Booth shot and killed Abraham Lincoln in the Ford's Theater, putting an end to the story and ideals of our 16th president. Lincoln's stance on slavery strengthened and resolved during his life, but the core remained the same. It was fundamentally and ethically wrong to own other humans. He went from an indifferent citizen who felt he could do nothing to change slavery to a more reserved but stronger form of abolitionism, to finally taking a hard stance against slavery and speaking out against it in politics and presidency. He has truly earned his place in history by living an accomplished life and freeing the enslaved in America.